The relentless sun beat down on Cairo, a familiar, heavy embrace that Ahmed knew intimately. His small, sweat-stained taxi, a relic of better days, coughed and spluttered through the choking traffic, each journey a testament to his sheer will. Ahmed was a man etched by the city's harsh realities, his face a map of quiet determination and weary hope. Every day began and ended with the same struggle, earning enough to keep his fragile world from collapsing. His meager income barely covered the mounting debts, let alone the increasingly expensive medications for his beloved mother, whose frail health was his constant, gnawing worry. His mother, a woman of profound grace despite her suffering, was the anchor of his existence. Her gentle smile, even through pain, fueled his tireless efforts. He dreamed of a life free from the suffocating grip of poverty, where her comfort was assured, and his younger siblings could pursue an education beyond their wildest dreams. This deep love, however, often bordered on desperation, making him vulnerable to opportunities that glittered with false promises. One sweltering afternoon, while waiting for a fare near the bustling Khan El Khalili Bazaar, a sleek black sedan pulled up alongside his battered taxi. A man emerged, impeccably dressed, with an air of quiet authority. He introduced himself as David, a businessman with an engaging smile and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. David spoke with a smooth, cultivated accent, his words painting a picture of ambition and opportunity. He offered Ahmed a seemingly legitimate, well-paying side job, transporting sensitive documents for an investment firm. The pay, he explained, would be substantial, far exceeding anything Ahmed could earn driving his taxi. Ahmed, his mind reeling from the sight of his mother's latest medical bill, felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by a tremor of unease. The offer felt too good to be true, yet the desperation was a powerful current, pulling him towards it. He accepted, unaware of David's true identity, or the labyrinthine web into which he was about to step. The initial unease never truly dissipated. David's demeanor remained mysterious, his instructions always precise, yet vague on details. The documents themselves were always sealed, their contents a closely guarded secret. Ahmed, however, couldn't help but notice the peculiar weight of the packages, the subtle rustle of what felt like financial ledgers, and occasionally the faint scent of old paper and foreign ink. There were no grand investment plans visible, only rows of numbers and what appeared to be coded messages. Despite his nagging suspicions, the money began to flow, steady and generous. For the first time in years, Ahmed could afford his mother's best treatments, and the burden of debt began to lift. The relief was immense, a warm blanket against the cold anxiety that had plagued him for so long. Yet this newfound financial ease was tainted by an internal conflict. Gratitude warred with a growing, unsettling suspicion about the true nature of his work. Then came the first test. During a routine delivery, David, in his usual calm tone, asked Ahmed to observe and report on a specific individual who would be present at the drop-off location. "Just tell me what he does, who he speaks to," David had instructed, his eyes piercing. Ahmed's heart pounded. This was no longer about transporting documents, it was about spying. The moral dilemma was stark: become an informant or jeopardize his family's newfound stability, perhaps even his mother's health. He chose his family. Days later, David, during a seemingly casual conversation, subtly hinted at his true affiliation. He spoke of national security interests, of protecting vital assets, and of eyes and ears in unexpected places. He never explicitly mentioned Mossad, but the implication was clear, heavy with unspoken threats. Ahmed's blood ran cold. The depth of his involvement, the true nature of David's organization, crashed down on him with terrifying force. He was entangled, caught in a dangerous game, and the implicit threat hung in the air: cooperation, or his family's safety was at risk. He was no longer just a taxi driver. He was a pawn, trapped by circumstance and desperation. Ahmed's mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. His initial reaction was visceral, a desperate urge to sever all ties with David, to retreat from this terrifying new reality. He tried to resist, to frame excuses, to subtly delay his next meeting with the enigmatic businessman. He spoke of family obligations, of a sudden increase in taxi work, anything to create distance. But David, with his unnerving perception, saw through every flimsy attempt. He didn't threaten directly, at least not with words. Instead, he painted vivid pictures of Ahmed's mother, frail and dependent, of his children's innocent faces, of the life Ahmed had painstakingly built. David's psychological manipulation was masterful, a subtle tightening of the invisible strings that now bound Ahmed. He played on Ahmed's profound love for his family, his deep sense of obligation to provide, twisting these noble instincts into instruments of control. The resistance slowly crumbled, replaced by a chilling resignation. The training began, not in a classroom, but through casual conversations and seemingly innocuous instructions. David taught Ahmed to observe, to notice the small details, a twitch in an eye, a particular brand of cigarette, the route a delivery driver routinely took. He learned to memorize license plates, faces, and snippets of conversation, all while maintaining the facade of a simple, unassuming taxi driver. Discreet communication became second nature, innocuous phrases in phone calls, coded gestures during drop-offs. Ahmed's life became a delicate balancing act, his weary taxi work interwoven with clandestine operations that grew ever more complex. The nature of the documents he transported also grew clearer. They weren't just financial ledgers. They were detailed transaction records, often in multiple currencies, alongside names of individuals and organizations Ahmed vaguely recognized from news reports, figures sometimes associated with radical groups or shadowy political movements. He started to piece together the puzzle, a terrifying mosaic forming in his mind. This wasn't about legitimate investment, but about funding networks, illicit flows of money, and clandestine operations that stretched far beyond his comprehension. His expertise grew with each passing day. He became adept at noticing patterns, recognizing familiar faces among the anonymous crowds, and understanding the jargon David occasionally used. Yet, this newfound competence came at a steep emotional cost. Constant fear gnawed at him, a low hum of paranoia that never truly subsided. He felt isolated, unable to share his secret burden with anyone, least of all his family. His internal justification became a mantra. He was helping a greater, unseen cause, or at the very least, he was protecting his loved ones from a threat he couldn't even name. One sweltering afternoon, during a drop-off in a bustling market, a suspicious contact lingered, his eyes too sharp, his questions too pointed. Ahmed felt a cold dread seize him, his heart hammering against his ribs. He barely managed to deflect the man's queries, his palms sweating, his voice hoarse. It was a close call, a stark reminder of the ever-present danger. When he reported it to David, the man merely nodded, a slight smile playing on his lips. David's reassurance and praise, though unsettling, reinforced Ahmed's importance, solidifying his role in this dangerous game. Then came the first direct request that shattered any remaining illusions of his work's benign nature. David handed him a photograph of a man, his face etched with a grim determination. "Find out everything you can about him," David instructed, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "He's involved with a particular group, one that poses a significant threat." Ahmed recognized the man from news reports. He was known to be a prominent figure in radical circles. Horror washed over Ahmed. The true implications of his work crashed down with sickening clarity. He was spying on his own people, potentially for a foreign enemy. The unspoken tension in the room was palpable. Ahmed was too deeply entangled to escape, a fly caught in a web spun with meticulous precision. Ahmed's transformation was startling, even to himself. The simple taxi driver, once concerned primarily with the next fare, had morphed into a sophisticated, albeit profoundly reluctant, informant. His mind, once filled with the mundane details of Cairo's streets, now processed complex patterns of behavior, financial flows, and the subtle nuances of human interaction. His value to David and to the unseen handlers beyond him escalated rapidly. The information he provided, gleaned from overheard conversations, observed deliveries, and painstakingly memorized documents, began to yield tangible results. He would see it on the evening news, often late at night after long shifts, the faint glow of the television illuminating his tired face. Reports of arrests, of financial assets frozen, of disrupted cells and thwarted plots. A chilling sense of pride mingled with profound dread would wash over him. He was making a difference, yes, but at what cost? He felt an increasing emotional distance from his family, a chasm created by the unshareable secret he carried. He couldn't explain his late nights, his distracted demeanor, the haunted look in his eyes. His mother, observant as ever, would sometimes ask if he was well, her questions piercing through his carefully constructed facade. He would offer vague assurances, his guilt a heavy cloak. His resentment towards David festered, a slow-burning fire beneath the surface of their professional interactions. Yet, he remained utterly dependent on him, a prisoner of circumstance and the unspoken threats that bound their relationship. Then came a moment of acute personal crisis. His mother's health, which had been precariously stable, took a sudden turn for the worse. The medical bills mounted again, threatening to overwhelm him. He blamed his clandestine life for his inability to be fully present, for the constant anxiety that consumed him, for the lost moments he could have spent by her side. David, ever the manipulator, seized the opportunity. He offered assistance for his mother's medical care, a sum far greater than Ahmed could ever hope to earn. It was a lifeline, but one that came with invisible strings, further entangling Ahmed in a debt of gratitude he could never truly repay. The psychological pressure intensified. Nightmares plagued his sleep, vivid scenes of exposure and betrayal. Insomnia became a constant companion, leaving him exhausted, hollow-eyed, and perpetually on edge. A constant sense of dread clung to him like a shroud, a premonition of inevitable doom. He developed a complex, almost paradoxical relationship with David. There was fear, certainly, a primal terror of the power David wielded over his life. But there was also a strange, grudging respect for the man's intelligence and meticulous planning. And beneath it all, a peculiar bond forged in the crucible of shared secrets, a silent acknowledgement of the dangerous game they played. One day, David introduced him to a new handler, a woman named Lena. She was younger, sharper, and far more ruthless than David. Her eyes held no warmth, only an unnerving intensity that made Ahmed's skin crawl. Her demands were immediate and uncompromising, increasing his anxiety tenfold. The missions became more perilous, the targets more directly involved in the networks Ahmed was helping to dismantle. Lena instructed him to infiltrate a more dangerous environment, a small, tightly knit group that met in a secluded cafe, known for its radical leanings. He was to pose as a sympathizer, carefully observing and reporting. The risk of exposure became terrifyingly real. A wrong word, a misplaced glance, could mean his end. He practiced his new persona in front of a cracked mirror, trying to project conviction he didn't feel, his heart pounding with each imagined encounter. Then, during a late-night rendezvous with Lena, a hushed conversation drifted from an adjacent, seemingly empty room. David's voice, unmistakable, laced with a weary resignation, spoke of Tel Aviv and Mossad directives. The words hung in the air, cold and stark, solidifying Ahmed's deepest fears. The revelation hit him with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a foreign intelligence agency. It was the foreign intelligence agency, the one he had been taught to view as the ultimate adversary. His world tilted on its axis, the lines between right and wrong blurring into an indistinguishable, terrifying haze. He was a pawn, not just in a dangerous game, but in a conflict that transcended his understanding, working for the very entity he had been raised to oppose. Ahmed fully comprehended the gravity of his situation. He was working for the intelligence agency of a sworn enemy. The words, Tel Aviv and Mossad directives, echoed in his mind, stripping away any lingering doubts or rationalizations. His internal conflict, once a simmering unease, now reached a fever pitch. A brutal battle between patriotism and the desperate, overwhelming need for his family's survival. He felt like a traitor, a betrayer of his own people and his homeland, yet the invisible chains binding him to David and Lena seemed unbreakable. Every path to escape appeared closed, each potential exit sealed by fear and obligation. The stakes were raised dramatically. Lena, with her icy demeanor and unyielding demands, began assigning Ahmed more critical assignments, pushing him further into the shadowed world of high-value targets. He was no longer just a courier, he was an active intelligence asset. His observations and interactions now carrying immense weight. He subtly began cultivating a network of unwitting contacts through his taxi service, a skill honed over years of navigating Cairo's bustling streets and listening to its myriad conversations. Snippets of information, seemingly innocuous details about local businesses, influential figures, and even idle gossip, became valuable intelligence when filtered through his handler's analytical lens. His observational skills, once a simple necessity for a taxi driver, now became legendary among his handlers. He possessed an uncanny ability to notice the minute, often overlooked, details that could unravel complex financial webs. A specific brand of coffee ordered, a peculiar hand gesture during a conversation, the subtle shift in a contact's demeanor, all were grist for the intelligence mill. Then came a chilling close call. One sweltering afternoon, as he waited for a contact outside a dimly lit cafe, a man with piercing, suspicious eyes approached him. The man, a known associate of the radical group Ahmed was infiltrating, questioned him pointedly, his tone laced with thinly veiled threat. "You seem to be everywhere these days, taxi driver," he sneered, his gaze lingering. Ahmed's heart hammered against his ribs, but his quick thinking and years of navigating precarious situations kicked in. He improvised a plausible story about expanding his taxi service, offering a discounted ride, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The man, seemingly satisfied for the moment, eventually moved on, but the encounter left Ahmed shaken to his core, a stark reminder of the razor's edge he walked. The emotional toll on his personal life was immense. His relationships, once the bedrock of his existence, became strained. He missed family events, his mind preoccupied with the constant threat of exposure. His laughter felt hollow, his smiles forced. He yearned for the simple, uncomplicated life he once led, though he knew it was irrevocably lost. Yet, amidst this despair, a small flicker of hope emerged. His mother's condition, thanks to David's assistance, continued to improve. Her gradual recovery, her gentle smiles, became a fragile anchor in the turbulent sea of his double life. Despite this glimmer, Ahmed remained trapped. He began to strategize, meticulously searching for an exit, a way to reclaim his life. But every avenue he considered seemed blocked, leading only to greater danger. He started to meticulously document his activities, a desperate clandestine record of every instruction, every delivery, every piece of information he provided. It was a desperate attempt to protect himself, a potential shield if he were ever discovered, a testament to his unwilling involvement. The first direct threat arrived, not from his handlers, nor from the radical groups, but from an unknown source. A small, crumpled note, left tucked under his windshield wiper, simply read, "We know you drive more than a taxi." The words were chilling, hinting at his double life, at the unseen eyes that were watching him. The realization hit him with a cold dread. He was being watched, not just by his handlers, who were a known quantity, but by potentially hostile, unknown entities. The fear was no longer just about David or Lena. It was about an invisible enemy lurking in the shadows, ready to strike. The walls of his carefully constructed double life were beginning to crumble. Ahmed's dedication to his family remained his unwavering compass, a singular point of light in the deepening gloom of his existence. Yet, his loyalty, once a solid, unshakable foundation, now felt fractured, splintered by the constant pressure and the insidious nature of his work. He was bound by an oath he never truly took, serving masters whose true intentions remained shrouded in mystery. A growing unease began to gnaw at him, a subtle but persistent suspicion that his handlers were not entirely truthful. He had provided a crucial piece of intelligence detailing a complex money laundering scheme, complete with names, dates, and account numbers. Weeks later, he learned through hushed whispers in the taxi stands. and then through official news channels, that while arrests had been made, the true masterminds, the architects of the scheme, had somehow slipped through the net. The information he had delivered, precise and actionable, had seemingly been ignored, or worse, misused, leading to an unexpected and deeply frustrating negative outcome. This incident ignited a simmering resentment within him, a profound doubt about the true motives of his handlers. Was he merely a tool, a disposable pawn in a larger, more complex game he couldn't comprehend? His trust in David, already a fragile construct built on desperation and manipulation, began to crumble, eroding like ancient stone under a relentless tide. Amidst this growing disillusionment, a new, dangerous variable emerged, a shadowy contact. A man known only as the Architect approached Ahmed with an audacious offer. This individual, rumored to be part of a rival faction within the vast clandestine network Ahmed was inadvertently helping to dismantle, attempted to recruit him. The Architect spoke of protection, of a new identity, of a life free from the suffocating grip of his current handlers. Ahmed found himself facing a profound moral dilemma: switch allegiances, plunging into an even more treacherous unknown, or remain with the devil he knew, albeit a devil whose trustworthiness was rapidly diminishing. He carefully navigated these dangerous overtures, playing both sides with a practiced subtlety born of years of deception. He listened intently, offered ambiguous responses, and gathered as much information as he could, always careful not to commit fully. The emotional impact of this potential betrayal weighed heavily on Ahmed. He felt like a commodity, a piece of merchandise to be traded, disposable once his utility expired. The dehumanizing aspect of his double life intensified, stripping away his sense of self. In response, he began to subtly withhold minor pieces of information, testing the waters, observing the reactions of his handlers, looking for any sign that his small acts of defiance had been noticed. It was a dangerous gamble, but one he felt compelled to take, a desperate assertion of what little agency he still possessed. Then came the triumph. A critical piece of intelligence he provided, a detailed blueprint of a funding pipeline leading directly to the neutralization of a major terrorist financier, made headlines across the globe. The immense relief and pride he felt were palpable, a rare moment of vindication. He had made a difference, a tangible impact that saved lives. Yet the joy was fleeting, quickly overshadowed by a deep sense of isolation. He couldn't share his triumph, couldn't bask in the recognition. His heroism was a secret, his victory a burden. The final, most shocking revelation arrived without warning. One day, preparing for his usual clandestine rendezvous, Ahmed found himself facing a new face, a man whose eyes held a cold, unyielding glint. This new handler introduced himself brusquely, offering no explanation for David's absence, no pleasantries, just a list of new, more demanding tasks. Ahmed's heart sank. David, the man who had pulled him into this abyss, the man with whom he had forged a strange, twisted bond, was gone, replaced. The new handler was clearly more ruthless, more demanding, entirely devoid of the manipulative charm that had characterized David. Ahmed was now truly alone, a pawn in new hands, facing an even more uncertain and perilous future. The comfortable, if terrifying, familiarity of his old masters had vanished, leaving him utterly exposed. Ahmed felt the chill of abandonment seep into his bones, a profound sense of being utterly isolated and expendable. The brusque demeanor of his new handler, a man whose name he barely registered amidst the shock of David's disappearance, confirmed his worst fears. This individual possessed none of David's calculated charm, none of the subtle psychological manipulation that, in a twisted way, had offered Ahmed a perverse sense of understanding, almost camaraderie. Instead, there was only cold, unyielding demand, a relentless push for more, with little to no regard for Ahmed's safety or well-being. He was a tool, nothing more, to be wielded until he broke. The information Ahmed now provided became even more crucial, targeting the highest echelons of illicit financing. He was delving deeper into the labyrinthine networks, identifying key players, tracing money trails that led to figures of immense power and influence. Each piece of intelligence he delivered felt like pulling a thread from a tightly woven tapestry, knowing that with enough pulls, the entire structure would unravel. The stakes had never been higher, not just for him, but for the countless lives his information could potentially save or, conversely, endanger. As he continued his perilous work, a subtle but insidious shift began to permeate his daily routine. He noticed it first in the periphery, a lingering gaze from a passerby, a car parked a little too long on his street, the faint echo of footsteps behind him that didn't quite match his own rhythm. The network he was so diligently infiltrating, the shadowy figures whose financial arteries he was severing, were becoming aware of an internal leak. The air grew thick with suspicion, a palpable tension that hummed beneath the surface of Cairo's bustling streets. Ahmed realized with a sickening lurch in his stomach that his cover was not just wearing thin, it was close to being blown wide open. Every interaction became a minefield, every shadow a potential threat. His anxiety, a constant companion for years, now reached an unbearable peak. The relentless pressure gnawed at his judgment, clouding his usually sharp instincts. He found himself making small errors, hesitating when he should have acted decisively, questioning his own perceptions. In a moment of desperation, a yearning for the familiar anchor of his past, he attempted to contact David. He tried the old, discreet channels, the coded messages, the carefully chosen dead drops. Each attempt was met with silence, a void that swallowed his pleas, reinforcing the terrifying reality that David was truly gone, and with him, any semblance of protection or understanding he might have once offered. Ahmed, a man who had always lived on the precipice, now began to prepare for the worst. His thoughts turned constantly to his family, his beloved mother, his wife, his children. He started making contingency plans, small, almost imperceptible changes to his financial affairs, ensuring they would be provided for no matter what transpired. He meticulously recorded a detailed account of his entire operation, every piece of information, every name, every date, every contact. He wrote late into the night, his hand cramped, hoping this document would serve as a posthumous confession, a vindication of his actions, or a desperate plea for justice should he fall. It was his final testament, a silent cry against the encroaching darkness. Then the direct threat. It wasn't a whisper or a lingering look, but a stark, undeniable message. He found it tucked beneath the sun visor in his taxi, a small folded piece of paper. On it, scrawled in an unfamiliar hand, were 3 chilling words. "We know, Informant." Below it, a crude drawing of a taxi with a target symbol. Ahmed's blood ran cold. The fear that had been a dull throb in his veins now surged, a torrent of icy dread. But surprisingly, amidst the terror, a fierce resolve ignited within him. He would not go down without a fight. He had sacrificed too much, endured too much, to simply surrender. The climax of his double life was building, a crescendo of danger and desperation. He knew his next mission, already outlined by his ruthless new handler, would be his most perilous yet. It was a plunge into the heart of the beast, a final, reckless gamble. As he mentally prepared for the inevitable, a final, devastating revelation struck him like a physical blow. Through a careless slip of tongue from a contact, a fragment of overheard conversation, he discovered that his cover had not just been compromised, it had been definitively blown. He was being hunted, not just by the network he sought to dismantle, but by those who had once claimed to protect him. He was a liability, a loose end, and both sides were closing in. There was no escape, only a reckoning. Ahmed found himself caught in a maelstrom, a deadly crossfire where every direction promised peril. The streets of Cairo, once his sanctuary and his livelihood, now transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and threats. He was hunted, not only by the vengeful financiers whose illicit operations he had so effectively disrupted, but also by his former handlers, who now saw him as nothing more than a dangerous liability, a loose thread in their intricate tapestry of espionage. The city, usually a symphony of bustling life, became a cacophony of alarms in his mind, each distant siren, every approaching vehicle, a potential harbinger of his end. The chase began subtly, a tale he recognized from his training, then another, more aggressive one. He swerved his taxi through the dense traffic, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Every alleyway, every shortcut, every hidden passage he had learned over decades of navigating Cairo's chaotic arteries now became his only hope for survival. He was a phantom in the urban sprawl, a fleeting shadow darting between ancient buildings and modern high-rises. His intimate knowledge of the city, sharpened by years of observation and ingrained into his very being, was his greatest weapon. He knew which streets would be gridlocked, which back roads offered an escape, which market stalls could provide temporary cover. His mind, despite the adrenaline coursing through him, remained razor-sharp, focused on a single, desperate objective: retrieving the incriminating evidence he had meticulously collected. It was locked away in a safe deposit box, a final act of defiance, a testament to his ordeal. He knew that without it, his sacrifice would be in vain, his story untold. He made a daring detour, weaving through a crowded bazaar, the shouts of vendors and the crush of bodies providing a chaotic shield. He reached the bank just as his pursuers closed in, the glint of a familiar face among them sending a jolt of ice through his veins. It was one of his former handlers, a man he had once trusted, now a hunter. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Inside the sterile confines of the bank lobby, amidst startled onlookers, Ahmed faced the man who had once given him orders. There was no dialogue, only the raw, visceral language of survival. A physical struggle ensued, a desperate ballet of blows and parries. Ahmed, though not a trained combatant, fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, fueled by years of suppressed fear and the thought of his family. He used his resourcefulness, his street smarts, his intimate knowledge of human weaknesses. A well-placed jab, a sudden twist, and he disarmed his attacker, leaving him momentarily stunned. With precious seconds bought, Ahmed retrieved his package. It was a compact flash drive containing years of intelligence, names, dates, financial records, the entire web of terror financing he had helped unravel. His mind raced. He had a contingency, a final desperate gamble. Weeks prior, in a moment of foresight, he had discreetly contacted a small, independent human rights organization, presenting himself as a concerned citizen with sensitive information. He had cultivated their trust, piece by piece. Now he needed them. He found a secluded internet cafe, his fingers flying across the keyboard, uploading the crucial data. The connection was slow, agonizingly so, each percentage point feeling like an eternity. He envisioned his family, their faces flashing before his eyes, a powerful current of love and determination pushing him forward. He watched the progress bar crawl, the emotional intensity of the moment almost unbearable, the fear for his life and his family's future a suffocating weight. Just as the final bite transmitted, the door burst open. He was cornered. Figures in dark suits flooded the small cafe, their faces grim, their intentions clear. Imminent capture, or worse, death, loomed. But Ahmed, for the first time in years, felt a strange sense of liberation. He had done it. The information was out. He met their gaze with defiance, his eyes burning with a quiet resolve. He would not give them the satisfaction of breaking him, of extracting any more information. In a move as audacious as it was unexpected, Ahmed created a diversion, shattering a window and leaping into the alley below, disappearing into the labyrinthine streets of Cairo once more. He left his pursuers baffled, their quarry having vanished like smoke. But his escape was not into anonymity. He knew this was not an end, but a beginning. With the data now in the hands of the human rights organization, Ahmed made a public plea, a desperate broadcast, exposing the network and, in doing so, sacrificing his anonymity for the sake of justice. He was no longer just a taxi driver. He was a whistleblower, a man who had chosen to burn his own world down to illuminate a greater darkness. Ahmed, now a ghost in his own city, moved with his family into the shadows. The public plea, a desperate gamble, had paid off, but at an immense personal cost. The information he released, a digital avalanche of truth, cascaded across global news feeds, sparking a firestorm of outrage and action. Widespread arrests followed, targeting the very architects of terror financing he had meticulously documented for years. Financial sanctions crippled organizations that had once operated with impunity, their dark networks exposed to the harsh light of international scrutiny. His actions had ripped open the intricate web of terror financing, revealing the shadowy world of intelligence operations that both enabled and fought it. The human rights organization, true to their word, moved swiftly. They provided Ahmed and his family with new identities, a new life in a distant land, a safe passage away from the immediate danger. The transition was jarring, a brutal uprooting from everything they had ever known. Ahmed grappled with the profound consequences of his choices. The loss of his old life, the familiar sounds and smells of Cairo, the constant, gnawing threat that still lingered in the back of his mind. His mother, initially shocked and heartbroken by the revelation of his double life, and his children, bewildered by the sudden upheaval, slowly, painstakingly, began to come to terms with his extraordinary sacrifice. It was a long, arduous road to healing, to rebuilding the trust that had fractured under the weight of his secret. There were days filled with despair, moments when Ahmed questioned if the immense price he paid was truly worth it. Yet, in the quiet solitude of his new existence, he found a profound, undeniable sense of peace. He had done the right thing. He had, against all odds, contributed to saving countless lives, disrupting a machinery of destruction that preyed on the innocent. He reflected on his incredible journey, from a desperate taxi driver praying for enough fares to cover his mother's medicine, to an unlikely hero who had stared into the abyss of global terrorism and fought back. The enduring scars of his past remained, etched deep within his psyche. The nightmares, the lingering paranoia, the profound sense of isolation that came with knowing too much. But alongside these scars, there was a newfound strength, a quiet resilience forged in the crucible of his experiences. He learned to navigate the anonymity of his new life, finding solace in the mundane, in the simple joy of watching his children play without fear, in the gentle rhythm of a life unburdened by secrets. Years passed, blurring the sharp edges of memory. They had built a quiet life in a new land, under a new name, but the same unwavering love for his family remained the anchoring force in his universe. One crisp autumn morning, a small, anonymous package arrived at their unassuming home. Inside, nestled among layers of tissue paper, was a simple, elegant frame. It held a letter, its words carefully chosen, expressing the profound gratitude of a grateful nation, a nation he had never visited, but whose citizens he had protected. Attached to it, a small, intricately carved silver taxi, a symbolic gesture of appreciation for his extraordinary courage, a silent acknowledgement of the humble beginnings of a man who had reshaped the world, one secret delivery at a time. It was a final, poignant reveal, a testament to the fact that even in the quietest corners of the world, heroes can emerge, leaving an indelible mark on history.